1. This is a story that happened a couple of years ago, so I'm going to do my best to remember as much of the details as I can. I was working in a warehouse a couple of years ago as a dock clerk. My job duties included processing and labeling containers of packages to be shipped globally. I was also one of a handful of forklift drivers in the building. I would have to drive a sit-down forklift from my side of the building to the far side of the building on a regular basis to pick up and move pallets of cardboard Gaylord shipping containers and bring them to the other side of the building. Sometimes I would have to do that at least 2 to 3 times during my shift. The various paths that they would set up for me to drive to do that part of my job could be pretty tricky at times, because I would have to raise the pallets into the air very high at times to make it around certain objects. That was not always the easiest task, but it was obtainable to do that for the most part. The building coordinator and I had not always seen eye to eye on things, and we would have regular disagreements on things the whole time I worked as a dock clerk at this job. He would attempt to set things up, and I would look at him and argue about the way that certain things would not work out, and the way he had set them up. His rebuttal would always be, "That is how the higher-ups wanted it," and I would prove him wrong on it just about every time. One day I came into work, and the building coordinator was already there, mapping out this one area to set up some new lanes to store the shipping containers in. The problem with the new lanes he was trying to put in place was that now I have to drive all the way around a conveyor belt, having to drive dangerously close to other workers, to then be able to drive to the other side of the building. He didn't want to listen to me when I told him that it would make my job and anyone else's working in that area now a very dangerous place to work in. The conveyor I would have to drive around would regularly have at least 3 or 4 girls working in that area. Also, the area I would now have to drive through is a high-volume area for foot traffic. It was near the break area and closest to security and the closest restroom for a lot of people. So I walked away and gave him one last chance to listen to me. Now for the malicious compliance. Since the building coordinator did not want to listen to my warning about the way he was setting up things in an unsafe environment, I waited for him to finish setting up the area, and then let him have it for the rest of the day. Afterwards, I tried to drive a forklift through the now designated area that he wanted me and any other forklift operator to drive through. Said area would have maybe a 4-foot gap that I would now have to maneuver a forklift through, with the end of the conveyor and trash cans on one side, and rolling bins sitting on the other side. The forklift I was using was roughly barely about that same width and size. I made it about halfway through, trying to go through that gap with a couple of coworkers and a security guard standing there to watch me try to drive through this gap. I'd come to this gap already at an angle because of other containers and items in the area I was coming from. I was headed to grab a pallet of shipping containers to bring back to my side of the building. This was all done in clear view of the security cameras also. Since I had to approach it at an angle, I ended up running into some of the rolling carts and pushing them into a fence on the other side of them. As soon as I hit the carts, I put my forklift in park, went to get my supervisor, explained what had happened and what had led up to it, and told him. I would back my forklift out of the area, and then I wouldn't touch the forklifts again until the issue was fixed. The next day, the building coordinator came in specifically on my shift to make sure he could set me up a lane that I could drive through, eliminating the lanes that he had set up the previous day. He made sure that he had checked with me on what I needed for it. I made sure the lane he set up was at least 2 storage lanes wide, clearly marked not to store anything in that area, and was able to drive through it without having to raise pallets of shipping containers in the air. 2. This takes place in a bulk buy store. I had worked there for 6 years by the time I quit. I was one of the longest running employees. I had worked there long before 4 out of the 6 managers had shown up, and I had moved through the different departments and shifts whenever I got bored of my current one. I had worked mornings, afternoons, nights, overnights. I had been a cashier, a membership rep, a warehouse stocker, etc. So after about 5 years of working there, I had requested a full-time position, due to being close enough to graduation that I could reduce my class load enough to work more, That, plus online classes because of the great pandemic, meant I could work more. Despite full-time positions being competitive and only available when someone with said position left, I believed my manager when they said they'd move me into full-time. 6 months after that, my department got a new department lead. I had known her before, and we worked well together. However, they promoted her to this position without training her for it. What followed was months of chaos. I was essentially teaching her how to do her job and playing liaison between her and the other employees of the department. She would disappear for hours at a time to have lunch meetings with upper management, whom she was friends with and got her job here due to her relationship with the store manager. She would claim to be running stock between delivery trucks and the main freezer and the department freezer, but would be gone for her entire 8 hours and no stock would be inventoried. She sent me to other stores in the area to get supplies from when we ran out of things she didn't order, which was very much against the rules due to the risk of car accidents while on company time. Essentially, I took over her job. I ran the phones and organized the special orders. I ordered stock and organized inventory between the 3 freezers. I baked the pies, cookies, breads, cakes, etc. needed for the department's stock. She was supposed to bake on Monday and Tuesday, but always called me in to do it because she didn't like early mornings. I decorated cakes and cupcakes, and figured out what the front store display cases should look like during holidays and football games. Eventually, she even had me doing the schedules for other employees, also against the rules. She came in late every day, left early every day. Everyone in the department was complaining about her, and my 2 favorite managers were trying to get it handled, but like I said, her BFF was the overall store manager. Nothing ever happened. In fact, on one occasion, the store manager pulled me aside and told me to stop causing problems and being dramatic. It was around this time that I realized my checks weren't reflecting my overtime. I was getting paid the regular rate for my overtime, which at this point was around 10 to 15 hours a week. When I approached my manager about it, I was told that, for some reason, I hadn't actually been transferred to full-time. I was part-time and just being scheduled for 40 hours a week, and actually working 50-ish hours a week. Oh yeah, they said, and because of that, you also don't have any of the full-time benefits. Well, that needs to be fixed immediately, I said. You said months ago that I was full-time. Well, there are no more full-time positions available for your department. The last open position was given to your co-worker. Co-worker, the one who has only worked here for 3 months. Yeah, they had given my full-time position to a co-worker who had just been hired. The real kicker was she didn't even work 40 hours a week and was given the spot over me because she's a mom who needs the insurance for her kids. Apparently, as a single person with no kids, I don't deserve insurance or any of the other benefits. So I was done. I said they had a month to get it corrected, and if they didn't, then I would leave. But I wasn't staying, I already knew that. I just needed them to think I was. Over the next month, I spoke to them weekly about their progress and always got space fillers and non-answers. I was interviewing for a new job at this point that was in my degree field anyway. 2 weeks in, I stopped placing inventory orders, stopped making schedules. It wasn't my job, and if the department lead didn't notice, well, that wasn't on me. I put my 2 weeks' notice in their mailboxes and texted them all that I had left important information in their boxes. And I was talking to every employee that asked, telling them what was going on. Negativity breeds negativity, and I was determined to make this as miserable a place to work as possible. Like I said, I had been there longer than almost all of them, and they all like me way better than the department lead. The pandemic chaos and overworking had put most of us on their last thread anyway. I also need them to know they were not to help my department if they could avoid it. I wanted it to crash and burn. I wanted management to have no backups. That wasn't hard. No one likes having to do someone else's job. The last Saturday of the month, their deadline, I go in and learn they still haven't transferred me to full-time, and that, in fact, department lead is leaving that day for her 2-week vacation. I get to work. See, the shipments around the holidays have a 2-week delay, and like I said, I had stopped ordering 2 weeks ago. A friendly coworker and I go into the 2 main freezers and pull out everything we still have. Then I bake everything. We can't have empty spaces on the tables, and if we're out of one thing, something needs to replace it. By noon, everything in stock for our department is gone. But the tables and shelves are fully stocked, so management doesn't blink an eye. The freezers are empty, the icing for cakes is running out. We're out of filling for the danishes and turnovers. It'll take at least a week to get anything if they put in an emergency order and can actually get it. As I go to lunch, my manager stops me and says he sent my full-time request to corporate, but it would take 2 weeks for it to be approved and activated if it got approved. I smile and nod and head to lunch. They clearly hadn't checked their mailboxes to receive my 2 weeks. I call my favorite manager while I'm out, the only one I personally handed my notice to. He's over a different department and works overnight, so he's never there with the other managers. But he can still approve PTO requests for me because I used to work in his department. He goes in and approves all my time off requests. I had enough PTO and enough protected PTO, which is a type of time off they cannot deny, to equal 3 weeks of work, and it started the next day. My 2 weeks' notice said my last working day would be March 6th, and that I would be using the remaining of my accumulated time off after that, and my final day employed would be March 24th. I took my 3-week paid vacation and started my new job on March 28th. They had never checked their mailboxes, but the cameras show me putting the letters in there. I have the text proof that I messaged them about leaving something important in the boxes. I even had the signed copy of receival from the manager who approved my days off, and a backup department lead that was equally annoyed, because she was the one stuck on helping my department when I wasn't there. There was nothing they could do. Not only was I leaving, but since department lead hadn't been doing the schedules and never told the managers that I was doing her job for her, no one was scheduled to work for the next 3 weeks. So when they showed up to work, because they needed the money, they'd be getting overtime pay. I had already discussed this with them, and the overtime only applied to full-time employees. And I do know the aftermath. It's been months since I left, and I know in the 2 weeks after 3 more coworkers quit. 2 of them without notice, as they had already gotten new jobs. The department lead lost the future manager position and was forced to go back into training at another store and try it again in a year. She was informed of all this whilst on her vacation, her honeymoon in fact, and had to return to work the next day her plane landed back home. The managers themselves had to work the department in the meantime. It took them 2 weeks to notice the lack of a schedule and the overtime discrepancy. We worked on 2-week pay cycles, and a month to stock the department back up to expected levels. They dealt with 3 corporate walkthroughs during that time because I and 3 of the employees still working had filed ethics violation complaints against management, and due to the sudden high turnover. One of the employees from the meat department even called the health department once the managers started cutting corners on the daily cleaning because they felt it was beneath them. How do I know this? Because for the first 2 months after I quit, I got texts and calls every week from friends who were still there, and updates from the employees as they quit. A few friends had been planning to quit anyway and modified their timeline for doing so to match mine as an FU to the company we all hated. As well as 3 calls from various department leads and managers asking if I'd found a new job, would I come back if they guaranteed full time? I stayed on the phone long enough to get the drama and then left when asked to come back and hung up. They tried to move other people from other departments into that one and tried to get it running again, and everyone threatened to quit or actually did quit when they were sent there. The revenue from that department dropped from the top performing to the very bottom for those weeks, and the store lost more money on apology gift cards for the special order cakes they didn't have the stock to make. There's now a new lead, and everything seems to be working efficiently when I go into shop now. But the few weeks of chaos I caused is still a proud moment for me. Nothing boosts your ego more than being begged to come back, even after your petty revenge on them. 3. When I was in high school, I worked at a dry cleaner. I was the one who talked to the customers when they dropped off or picked up their clothes. Between customers, I would pull the clothes out of the bag, tag them, inspect for stains, attach any notes, and check the pockets. One of the regular customers was a nice-looking businessman who wore really nice suits and shirts, but was an absolute creep. His wife definitely enjoyed living the high life, but was a nice woman. He always dropped off the clothes, and she usually picked them up, unless she was out of town. I was 16, 17, and they were in their early 30s. He would make suggestive comments, or would flat-out say I had a nice rack, and he would like to bury his face in it. It was the early 90s, and I was young. It was embarrassing. And even if I complained, no one would have cared. Thank God times have changed. Of course, he got progressively worse, and one day, as he left, he turned to me and said, "I got something in my pocket. Go ahead and toss it, but if you like, we can use one." I had no idea what he was referring to until I reached into his pocket and pulled out a used condom. I began to notice any time his wife was out of town, and occasionally when she wasn't, there would be used condoms in his suit pockets, Coke fulls, rolled-up bills, and the occasional lipstick stain on his shirts. He would always point those out and say, if we can't get it out, toss the shirt, which we did. Clearly, he is not only a creep who hits on teens, but he's fucking around on his wife a lot. One day I just had enough. I knew his wife was out of town because he only brought in his clothes, and I knew what to expect in the pockets. I made small talk as I wrote up his ticket, and learned his wife would be the one picking up the order, so make sure to toss the shirts if the stains don't come out. Sure enough, 4 used condoms out of the 5 suits. 2 had Coke fulls and rolled up bills, and 2 shirts with lipstick stains. I put the condoms in a bag and Coke bills in another. I forgot to put a note on the shirts to toss if the stains didn't come out. After the cleaning, I assembled the order and put big old stick-on arrows to point to the stains, and notes said we couldn't get the lipstick out. Attached the bags of found items and waited. When the wife came in, I pulled the order and noticed the arrows. I apologized to the wife and said I wouldn't charge her for them since we knew we were supposed to toss any of the shirts with lipstick stains that didn't come out. She was livid and started to say it was our fault. I was thinking of the wrong customer, and how dare I imply her husband was cheating. If I was a guy, I would say my balls dropped in that moment because I calmly said, he left something in the pockets too. Just like he does when you're always out of town and sometimes when you're not. She didn't say a word, just grabbed everything and left. Didn't even pay the bill. I had to explain to my boss why she didn't pay, and he was pissed at me because we keep our customers' secrets, and just because he said gross things to you, it wasn't like he was going to do anything. He had the nerve to say the $93 cleaning bill would be deducted from my check. The following week, the other counterperson was going on vacation, so I was the only one scheduled to work open to close. So I just didn't show up or call and ignored the phone. They mailed my final check with a snarky note about how unprofessional I was, and that they didn't deduct the $93 because they would never give me a good reference, so I would never find another job and would need it. When the other girl came back from her vacation, she told me they had to close the front from 10 to 3 every day, since the wife couldn't handle working open to close, and orders were all fucked up. She quit a few months later, and they're still blaming me for losing a good customer because the creep and his wife never came back. They actually had her, and the new counterperson they hired to replace me, sign a contract, stating they would toss any trash, follow customers' instructions, and not tell their secrets. As for the creep and his wife, I don't know what the fallout was, but I do remember their names, so I looked them up on Facebook. And they must have gotten divorced shortly after that because she just celebrated her 25th wedding anniversary to someone else. She is clearly living a good life and appears to be well off. He doesn't post much, but the few pics he had posted show he isn't living the high life anymore. I like to hope my act of petty revenge played a role in their divorce, and she took him for everything she could. 4. Background. In the 1950s, my grandpa started a trucking company that turned out to be a major success. However, he made it clear to his children, my mom and my 2 uncles, that it was only a successful company because he'd worked his ever-living ass off to make it successful, and he expected them to always work hard and help others. My parents instilled the same values into me. When I, 19, female, was about 15, I started working for my first summer job. I had just finished my freshman year in high school, and I was planning on volunteering at a local hospital for the second time. I'd done so the summer before. But I wanted some spending money as well. I managed to secure a job at an ice cream shop in late May, just before the school year ended, and worked there for a month and a half before my mom told me there were some job openings at the senior living facility where my grandparents lived. Now, I hadn't been planning to spend the summer working 3 jobs at 15, but I was keen on the idea of getting to visit my grandma after work, so I applied. My application was accepted, and I was asked to come in for an interview. I went to the interview and was surprised to learn that the man who would become my boss, Josh, knew my parents. My manager had met my mom, but wasn't friendly with my parents like Josh was. Anyway, I passed the interview, got the job, and was told when my start date was. The day I started my new job, I thought it was cool that everyone was being nice to me. I assumed it was because I was one of the newest and younger employees. I was on the waitstaff in the dining room for dinner shifts, 3:45 p.m. to 7:15 p.m., and because it was a good job, I continued working during the school year as well as summers for the rest of the time I was in high school. During the school year, I had work 1 day a week due to my extracurriculars like theater, then 4 or 5 days a week during the summer. I eventually started working morning shifts, 6:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. During summers, and during the school year, I would pick up extra shifts when I could, especially during the outbreak of the pandemic. Josh left in June of 2020, and let's just say that no one was exactly sad about the change. He left with a lot of hard feelings towards him. I went to Wisconsin for a gap year program this fall, and started working at the senior living facility again for my summer. I was kept on the payroll. They do this for waitstaff who are going to college but want to work whenever they're home for breaks or the summer. I was covering a 3-week-long period for someone who works in AL, assisted living. My first week back was spent training with her while she was there, and then with someone I'd worked with in the main dining room, Sarah, on Thursday. I had asked to be scheduled Mondays through Thursdays, so Sarah was my last training session before I'd be flying solo. Sarah and I got to talking while we cleaned up after the breakfast crowd, and she told me that a lot of the people I had formerly worked with didn't like me because of my grandparents and Josh. When I asked her to elaborate, she told me Josh had insisted that everyone needed to be nice to me at all costs, and our manager had done the same. I guess Josh had been hoping that by having everyone as well as himself be on good terms with me, my grandparents might be extremely generous with their donations to the Christmas fund. This had backfired on him because the other waitstaff couldn't stand me by the time he left, and that I was a stuck-up spoiled brat who didn't want to work and lived on her family's money. I had to admit I was hurt. I had considered several of those people friends. Sarah didn't feel that way, especially since she'd gotten to know me and knew how important helping people and working hard was to my family and to me. If I'm honest, I think she only said that because she hadn't meant to tell me about the other people's feelings towards me. When the person whose shifts I was covering came back, I started working in the main dining room again. This time just working lunch shifts, 10:45 a.m. to 2 p.m., with the occasional morning shift. During these shifts, I tried to help whoever was working in the dining room with me wherever I could, removing dirty plates, bringing residents who sat down late fruit cups or drinks, etc. Then, 3 weeks ago on a Monday, Lizzie, a girl who's been working with me since I started, told me in front of several residents, may I add, "Oh, Pete, stop it. I think I speak for everyone when I say I don't want help from a spoiled brat with no work ethic." Cue me enacting the pettiest act of compliance I could. The next day, I stayed away from her and only helped Mary Alice, who knows my family and likes me quite a bit, since she and I work on the same side of the dining room. Anytime Lizzie asked me to do something, do a coffee round, hold something for her, literally anything, I would roll my eyes, ignore her, and ask, "Can't you do it yourself?" Our current manager talked to me about it, and I explained that I wasn't going to help someone who clearly couldn't stand me since she had pretty much lied to my face for almost 5 years. My manager actually started to ignore Lizzie when she complained about me being a stuck-up brat. I got extra joy out of all of this because when I was still helping her, she usually left around 1, half an hour early. Now things have changed. I get to leave at 1. Now she has to clean her entire section herself. My last day of work until Christmas break was on July 14th, and when I walked out, I heard her tell another coworker she was probably going to quit. I didn't actually know anything about the whole problem with me Josh had caused until Sarah told me, and I started the job when I was 15. All the residents pitched into the Christmas fund. It was actually started 2 years before I started working there, because the residents wanted to thank the workers for all they do for them. I should probably have said that sooner. 5. Background. I worked for an internet service provider in Australia called eNet. We were at the time one of the biggest providers, but crucially, we did not own our ADSL1 network, and we only on-sold the ADSL service from the biggest provider in the country, Telstra. Stick with me, this is a different story. Wales had a policy that an ongoing issue should have a case owner, and I was a case owner for this, which is why I got multiple calls about it. Act 1. A wild Karen appears. I get a call from a wild Karen. While doing an ID check, she provides me with her age. And of course, she's in her 40s. Her internet went down. I look at the account and I can see she's got unsold Telstra service. One thing catches my eye. Although there are thousands of exchanges, central place your connection goes to, shared by multiple suburbs in the country, and you can't possibly know them all, I know the one she is on because a few weeks earlier a friend was considering buying a house in the area. And I looked at this one and found that there are no free ports, and thus it is impossible to get a new service connected. The waiting list for a new connection was 2.5 years at least. So I asked her to do the troubleshooting steps, and she says she does, but I suspect she's just telling me she's doing it to make me go away. Whatever, nothing I can do about that. We exhaust all the troubleshooting, and I tell her there appears to be a line fault. I can send out a technician, but it will take 3 to 5 working days, and if there is actually nothing wrong with the line, she will be charged $199 plus $40. Numbers might be wrong, it was a while back, but it was at least $200 for every 15 minutes of work to cover the technician's time. I play her the disclaimer that outlines this, and she says, "Yeah, I accept." On the recording, I lodge a fault. Act 2, the fault, in our loop. She calls after 2 days, sounding annoyed things are still offline. I tell her it hasn't been 5 days. She hangs up. On the 5th day, I get the technician's report saying no fault found. Next day, she calls. "So, my connection is still offline. It's been 5 days. What's happening?" Well, the technician attended the fault and his report says no fault found. What? Well, that's bullshit. The internet is clearly down and you need to fix it. I don't doubt that the internet is offline, but the fault does not appear to lie within our area of responsibility. I would suggest you check your local equipment. That's not true. My son's an IT guy and the router is brand new. Okay, well, I can't speak for the state of your equipment, but our equipment appears to be in working order. Incidentally, I just want to give you a heads up that we will be placing an incorrect call-out fee on your next invoice. You're lying to me. I didn't see no technicians, and now you want to charge me over $200 based on your lies? I won't let that happen. I assure you, the technician attended the reported fault. However, you did not see them because they probably only went to the exchange, which is approximately 4 kilometers away from you. You're lying to me. I'm not paying the fee. What can I do now? Well, if you're adamant that your equipment is not at fault, your only option is to file another fault and send the tech out again. It is fairly rare, but it is not impossible the technician was wrong.
And then you'll pretend you send the tech and charge me another incorrect call-out fee.
We will most definitely send out another tech, but yes, it is very likely to come back as another NFF. And in that case, a further fee is likely.
That's bullshit. I've been with you for 5+ years and this is how you treat me? Cancel my service now. I will go to your competitors. They'll want my money.
Ma'am, the exchange you're connected to only has Telstra ports and is at 100% utilization. If I cancel your service, you will lose your spot. It is unlikely any of our competitors will be able to provide you any service at all. You should just transfer your service to the next provider. So-called churn. This will allow her to keep her spot.
Don't you tell me what to do, you lying sack of shit. You will cancel my service now, or I will do everything in my power to have you fired.
Oh, I'm pissed off myself. It's a shit situation, but there's no need to take it out on me. I'm trying to help her, and that's her response? Engage malicious compliance. Okay, ma'am, hold on for a minute. I'm canceling your service. Okay, cancellation processed. Let me just remind you that the incorrect call-out fee is still due.
You won't see a cent of that.
Noted, but the amount is over collections threshold, so we will send you to collections. She hangs up. Act 3. The joys of the waiting list. About a month later, I get a request to transfer to me. It's Karen. I take a moment to catch up on her file, and the service is cancelled and fee invoiced. I run a quick service qualification on her line, and I can see that her service, so-called codes, have dropped off and there are no other codes on her line. She did not manage to get connected with anyone.
Hello, I think I spoke to you last time.
Yes, you did.
My internet is still down and you're still charging me for the fee. I need you to get rid of it.
I cannot do that. The charge is valid.
Well, I can't pay it. You've ruined my business. I was operating on e-commerce business and that won't be possible anytime soon.
Running a business over residential connection is a breach of customer service agreement, but I let that slide. I am sorry for your predicament, but the fee stands.
I'll do you a deal. If you reconnect my service, I will pay the fee.
I can probably sign you up again, even though you're behind on payment, but I was not lying to you when I told you that there are no ports on your exchange. It is very unlikely you would get a port, they're all in use. Did you try our competitors as you said you would?
I did. None of them would even try signing me up, because they told me they couldn't provide a service.
We are in the same situation.
Why can't you just give me back my old port?
Because it was given to the first person on the waiting list.
And how long does the waiting list take?
Last time I checked, more than 2 years.
This is ridiculous. I'm going to telecommunications industry ombudsman.
You may do so, as is your right, but to be very clear, we will substantiate the validity of our fee.
Whatever.
Conclusion. She did in fact file a complaint with the TIO, and I handed her case over to a TIO complaint specialist. I made sure to point out that she was breaching TOS with business over residential service. TIO obviously ruled in our favor, and we were allowed to send her to actual collections. Before I left the company, about 1.5 years later, I caught up on her file, and she had filed a loss of business claim, which was summarily closed because residential connections have no service level agreement. Last contact was her speaking to our credit team, asking them to make sure to mark her debt as paid with our collections people, and make sure that is reflected on her credit rating. There were still no codes on her line. It is quite unlikely she got any reasonably priced service connected for at least 2 years, realistically longer as demand only ever went up. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 172. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do boop the like button, and share the video with friends and family. That really has been helping. So let's keep that going. Okay, let's see. We are... Doesn't matter what day of the week it is. I also can't remember. My brain's gone numb. But do we have any shout-outs today? I don't think we do. I know there's one in the 18th. I think it's 2 in the 18th, actually. Maybe 3. But nothing is in today. Okay, so let's just move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question comes from Frisbee Ferret, also known as Castillo, the partner of my brand new moderator, Venikins. Big welcome to you, Venikins. Thanks for joining us. And the question is, where you live, there are probably nearby or somewhat nearby local popular attractions that are very popular with tourists, but you've never been or you just don't find interesting for some reason or another. Like, for example, in Scotland, I've been to Edinburgh Castle, it's fine. I've never been to Stonehenge, though. It's a very fine henge as far as henges go, but we don't know a lot about it, and what little we do know, I can read about. I don't have to go and look at big rocks to see it. But it's very appealing to other people, and if it gives you some sort of pleasure to visit it and take pictures and such, then have at it, that's what I say. But what are some of the cool things maybe that you guys live near and have never been to? Or sort of near. I mean, in my case, Stonehenge isn't near, but it's in the country. Do let me know by leaving a comment below, and maybe give me some ideas. I would like to go traveling someplace. Maybe I'll go poke the Liberty Bell or something, or tip my hat to Abraham Lincoln on Rushmore. Anyway, with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.